Right, let's get on with our series and finally complete the LGTM stack for monitoring OpenClaw agents locally. We've set up metrics, we've set up logs, and finally we'll be setting up traces. I'm particularly excited about adding traces because they are just so cool. They give you a drill down into what a resource is actually doing under the hood. Traces are a powerful way to debug complex issues that span multiple services, so I'm very excited to see how they look like for an agent. Let's get into it. Here's our final architecture update. We'll be using Tempo to add traces to our current stack. One interesting thing to note is that Tempo runs on similar ports to Alloy, but we just won't expose these ports outside Docker to avoid a clash. So we already have Alloy, Prometheus, Grafana, and Loki running. The OpenClaw agent already has diagnostics enabled and is pointed at Alloy. What we need to do is add Tempo to the Docker Compose file. Let's add it here. Port 3200 is fine. I don't need this. And then we need a volume for Tempo as well. So let's add a volume. Cool. Tempo also requires a config file, which we mapped as a volume onto the container. So let's add it as well. And it's called tempo.yaml. So this config represents a simple minimal single node setup for Tempo. And as you can see, these are similar ports to Alloy, but we're not exposing them outside the container. So now, as we did with logs, the next step is to extend the OpenTelemetry receiver in Alloy to receive traces. So what we want to do is, we have metrics, we have logs, let's add traces, and then we need a batch for traces as well, and then an exporter. Should I add this? Sorry, under the Loki exporter. Right, and now because this is local, we're using insecure TLS, but obviously in production environments, never do this. So now, like we did in last video, let's just confirm that OpenClaw has traces enabled. So in my OpenClaw config file, it should be at openclaw.json. Right, so in my OpenClaw config file, I can see that we have traces enabled as well. A good thing to do would be to restart the gateway again. But before we do that, let's start the Docker containers. Right, so Tempo is running. Let's also restart Alloy just to be safe. And then check some logs. Okay, I don't see any obvious issues. Looks like Tempo started out properly. Let's see if Alloy has any issues. No, Alloy is all good as well. Cool, so we can restart the OpenClaw gateway. Another thing we can do is check on the Alloy UI to see what the graph now looks like. Right, so we have metrics, we have logs, and now we have traces going to Tempo, which is fantastic. So let's go back to the OpenClaw agents and tell it to tell us another story. And while this is running, it's been interesting to see if we can get any metrics that show that Tempo is being sent. Oh, nice. You can see OpenClaw, OpenTelemetry exporter queue capacity, not bad. Let's see if there are any traces. There's nothing super obvious here except that you can see that traces are properly set up, but I can't tell whether traces are actually being sent. But this is a good sign. And if you look at the trace processor itself, it shows healthy, so we can go ahead. You know what? traces aren't working because you've made it this far and you haven't subscribed. So now we can explore our tempo traces on the Grafana dashboard by adding a new data source. We have Loki, we have Prometheus, and now we want tempo as our trace backend. So I'm going to make this the container name because they are all in the same network, and the ports. Yeah, let's test that. Cool, so tempo is connected. Fantastic. And now we can explore and select tempo. This is why we see no traces. So alloy should be fixed now. Let's try to generate more information and more traces and see if traces have been exported now. Let's try again. Nice. So we can see traces on Grafana now, which is fantastic. And if I click on a trace ID, I see exactly what OpenClaw is doing. But it has just one span. And if you look at the span itself, you can get more information about what it is and what it has done. But yeah, just one span that shows model usage. Let's see if there's any other interesting thing. Another trace that has one span as well. This is a bit anticlimactic if I'm being honest with you. So just one span that shows the message was processed. Let's see what happens and if a trace shows if I tell the agent to find a file or do something in a directory. I'd expect to see more spans in the traces for stuff like this. Nice, our files are written. So let's run our query again to see if there is more that can be said. So we have our message process trace and the model usage trace. Cool, so I only see model usage as well. Fair. And message processed as well has only one span. So it's not looking like you get a ton of spans that show you what the agent is actually doing, which is a bit disappointing to be honest. But I think that's something that can be solved in the future. So I'm sure OpenClaw is still very much in early development, specifically early development in terms of monitoring. So this is an opportunity to add this information. I'll do a video in the future that talks about how to reason about observability for AI agents in general and how to add traces to what the agent is actually doing. Would be a very interesting topic. So that's it for now. Our stack is complete, and by completing this series, you now understand how to add the full observability stack to your OpenClaw agents. I'd say congratulations are in order. We can take all of this further and look at how to deploy the entire stack to Grafana Cloud so you can monitor your agents that are deployed beyond just your local machine. Watch out for that video. And if this series has helped you, don't forget to like the videos and subscribe. It really goes a long way to help me make more videos like this for you. See you in the next one.